Welcome everybody to this webinar. This webinar is being brought as part of the British Occupational Hygiene Society's Faculty of Occupational Hygiene series of webinars. We have these every month, and I'll tell you a little bit more about those going forward. But the faculty is interested in keeping people up to the professional standards levels that is required for the occupational hygiene profession, and understanding potentially new or different views on various topics. And with Christmas coming up, a lot of people will be getting AirPods and other presents in their stockings, and so we felt that this may be an opportune time to hear from the speaker today. Dr. David Greenberg is the CEO and founder of Eve, a UK health tech company which is dedicated to ending the isolation and loneliness that comes with hearing loss. I've known of David's work through his first product line, which is a complete hearing protection system for industrial workers, particularly in the construction sector, where continuously monitoring for noise is carried out through wearers' exposures using hearing protection. Prior to founding Eve, Dr. Greenberg was a NHS clinical and research audiologist. He taught hearing science at the UCL Medical School and School of Audiology, and received a PhD in auditory neuroscience for his published work on the neural mechanisms underlying hearing, deafness, and communication. Today, David is going to talk about the Apple AirPods as hearing protection ? So, David, I'll leave the floor to you. Oh, sorry, and could I just remind people to put questions in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring those as they come through. So all yours now, David.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. And thanks for the introduction. Pleasure to be speaking to everyone here. This is a topic that is pretty interesting for those in occupational health. It's blurring the lines, of course, between consumer brands and consumer products and the workplace, which is obviously has different levels of regulation and requirements. And this was a presentation I first gave at the annual UK Hearing Conservation Association conference a couple of months ago now. And it was in person. It was a live event, so of course there were lots of people that couldn't make it there, although we did have about 100 people. And so Mary had the brainwave that maybe we should do it as a webinar as well. And so here we are. So thank you to the BOHS and the UKHCA for that. I should say I'm also a director of the UKHCA, one of the founding directors. We've been going for about 6 years now. So if you are interested in hearing conservation specifically, do find out more on the website. And it's great to have this partnership with BOHS, which has now been going for a couple of years. At Eve, we focus on disease prevention broadly, but we did start off with manufacturing hearing protection. And I did find myself as a one-time academic, I do have a particular interest in things like standards and data. And so are my slides progressing? Sorry, I can't see them. Just realized that.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, it's like technical. Okay. So I found myself on the standards committee for hearing protectors. That is it's the BSI National Committee named PH7, very catchy, but PH7 involves itself in all standards matters related to hearing protectors. And so in my work on that working group over the years, of course, when AirPods, when Apple started to announce the idea of a hearing protector feature in their latest AirPod Pro 3s, I was intrigued. And so I found myself diving into the declaration of conformity and all the test results and so on and so forth. And before I knew it, I'd been asked to present what I'd learnt at the UKHCA conference and put together some slides. And so hopefully this is going to be helpful to anyone wondering about the use of AirPods in the workplace for noise control and noise protection. But the reason I talk first of all about the PH7 committee is to give a bit of context and also a bit of a call to action, if you like. So the BSI's National Committee PH7 is responsible for providing the UK's input to the European Committee CEN-TC 159, which is just the European version of PH7, if you like, also for hearing protectors. And it's the committee that develops the EN352 series of requirement standards. We're also responsible at PH7 and CEN-TC 159 for the related test methods in EN 13819 parts 1, 2, and 3, and the hearing protector guidance standards 458 and 17479. And those cover all things related to the manufacture and production of hearing protection, the testing of hearing protection, the use of hearing protection, use and selection, the management of hearing protection, the maintenance. It covers a whole breadth of things, all things related to hearing protection. So again, when the AirPods thing came out, I was like, okay, well, this is in my wheelhouse. I'm going to understand this. PH7 comprises experts from manufacturing, test and certification bodies, regulators, and other professional bodies. And the work ensures that the development of these standards are aligned, the European standards is aligned with the interests of UK industries to better safeguard and protect worker exposure to harmful noise. And this is the call to action. We're looking to expand on the stakeholders that are represented on the National Committee, and in particular for people working in high noise industries. So I'm sure that there are some people in the audience today who maybe have an interest in standards and why are we interested in those? Well, to make sure people are staying safe and that products don't come onto the market that are maybe misrepresented or are not appropriately tested and so on. And we welcome representatives from this audience to join the group. So if you do have relevant expertise, you're keen to positively influence and collaborate on the national position for hearing protection technology, then you can apply to become a committee member at that link down there. I'm sure these slides will be shared afterwards, or you can take a note of it there. It's a relatively simple process, but I would encourage you. It's a nice group of people to be working with on a topic that is of interest. It may well be of interest to you. So, to set the context of these AirPods in workplace noise, we need to understand a little bit about the EN352 family of standards first of all. So there are 10 parts in 352. You can see them listed on the left. So it's simply 352 part 1 through to 10, and each one concerns itself with a different aspect of hearing protector functionality. And so you can see that on the device type, each one is related to a different device type. So EN352 part 1 is for earmuffs, part 2 earplugs, part 3 helmet mounted earmuffs, part 4 level dependent earmuffs, part 5 active noise reduction earmuffs, part 6 earmuffs with safety audio input, part 7 level dependent earplugs, part 8 entertainment earmuffs, part 9 earplugs with safety related audio input, and part 10 entertainment earplugs. Now this is really important to know about if you're responsible for selecting hearing protection for use in the workplace, because these are all these are all relevant, but for very specific use cases. So first of all, you need to obviously know about your work environment, and then you need to understand, based on the options available to you, what standards within the EN352 family are relevant. And then below this list, you've got 458, 13819, and 4869, which are all related to the selection and use and the testing and so on, which are also relevant. In particular, 458, when you're choosing which type of hearing protection is appropriate for your workplace. So which ones of these have the AirPods Pro 3 been tested against? Of course, because they're not all necessarily relevant, but also there is an important distinction between tested against and then passing or failing, against it, and also that each one has a different type of outcome, if you like. So some of them give you just a rating once you've tested against it. Some of them are pass fail, and some of them are just give information about the functionality, for example. And we'll go through which ones are relevant to the AirPods and what the outcomes are as well. So the AirPods have been tested against the IN352 part 2, which is just for passive earplugs. Then part 5, which is for the active noise reduction earmuffs, but they've done it as earplugs. So they've sort of almost misused essentially what the purpose of that particular one was, but okay, they will still get the results. Then the level dependent earplugs, part 7, earplugs with safety related audio input, part 9, and part 10, entertainment earplugs. And so each one of these covers just looking at the ones that the Pro 3 have been tested against. Part 2 covers the battery off passive attenuation. Now, this is really a fundamental one for choosing the right type of hearing protection, because this is where you get your SNR rating, right? So this is the kind of the number on the box, the simple single number rating for the hearing protector. What can it do when the battery is off? And that is a critical requirement for in the UK in particular for selecting the right type of hearing protection. It must be assessed based on its passive attenuation with the battery off. So that's part 2. And then they've tested for the ANC mode when they're using noise cancellation. I would say that the noise cancellation functionality and how that works is slightly out of scope for this presentation. But I'm sure most of you are, if not all of you, are now very familiar with the idea of a phase cancelling of sound when you're using perhaps a pair of earmuffs or even Bose or Apple or Sony headphones. Most mid to high end headphones now have a form of noise reduction, active noise reduction, where they're playing an antiphasic sound wave and cancelling out the sound energy coming through to the ear. It's got some very specific known limitations, which we'll talk about briefly, but it's amazing technology that they're now able to do this in earplugs as well, and we'll look at the capabilities of that. Part 7 is all related to the transparency function, which we'll talk about, the adaptive audio that the AirPods offer, and then part 9 and part 10, the phone comms mode, so when you're communicating via a phone call with the AirPods, and part 10, the music media playback volume on the AirPods. And that's what you're going to find out, is that part 10 is actually what they're promoting when they're talking about AirPods having a hearing protection feature. It's a really key bit of wording that they've used, and it's the only wording they use when they're talking about these as hearing protection. They're not actually talking about them as hearing protection. They're talking about them as having a hearing protection feature, and we'll talk about why that is. Essentially, it's limiting the output at the speaker. It's not providing protection from the environment, and that is what they're promoting. Apple, obviously an incredible brand, very powerful in terms of their marketing reach. Fantastic that they're even talking about this idea of hearing protection. So doing a lot to promote the issue, if you like, of noise exposure and hearing loss and tinnitus that results from noise exposure. But of course, they are also a massive source of it. Headphone listening is a huge thing. People have been doing it for now decades already, but it's increasingly prevalent, of course, with new technology that comes about. So they are a key stakeholder in managing this as a societal issue, if you like. So I don't know how many people have got the AirPods. I would have, if we were in a room together, I would say, give me a show of hands. But normally there's a good number of people that have got them. This is only related to the AirPod Pro 3s. So when I was asked to give this presentation at the UKHCA, I did go out and buy myself a pair. So having read all the documentation and so on, that really you do need to try these things out and get a pair. I didn't return them after a month or before the month that I bought them, which says something. So I have kept them. I used to use daily the Aftershok's bone conduction headphones. I do a lot of cycling, and so situational awareness is really important, where I also like to make phone calls and listen to music and so on. So I was using the bone conduction ones, which is an interesting product as well for various reasons. But then buying the AirPod Pro 3s was as part of this research. I now do use them for phone calls and so on. But in any case, they come in this white case, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. They've got these stalks, they've got ear tips, and they've got various sensors built in and so on, which we're going to talk about. So when you've got your AirPods connected to your phone, You then get these various screens. This first screen is when you go into the hearing protection settings on the phone related to the AirPods, and it says workplace use. EN352 protection is on, so I've switched it on, and it says media volume limit 82 dB. And then you've got that option below, turn off EN352 protection. Now, what's really important here, and this is sort of, as I say, at the top of the presentation for a reason, the hearing protection feature that they're talking about is the media volume limit. So that's EN352 part 10. And all it relates to, it's a pass-fail, is does the product limit the output at the speaker when music is on to 82 dBA? And yes, that is what they do. And that is what Apple are promoting when they're talking about this hearing protection functionality. So here you see in there the wording below, EN352 protection limits the maximum level of media to 82 dBA and meets applicable EN352 standard requirements for personal hearing protection. They're referring to 352 part 10, none of the other ones there. Then you've got a button to do a test acoustic seal, which is a really great little feature, but it is specifically here for the purpose of noise reduction, noise cancellation, because ANC only works if you've got a good seal and the AirPod is positioned correctly. If the seal gets broken slightly, then the phase cancellation just doesn't work really effectively at all. It does also impact passive attenuation, as you would expect. If you're wearing them as earplugs, then they've got to be fit correctly. So you've got a way to actually test that, and I'll show you what that looks like shortly. But it says a good seal helps with acoustic performance, and there's one part of a great fit. The most comfortable tips for you may be different to the ones that provide the tightest seal. I used the sort of the middle tip size. I've got pretty average sized and shaped ear canals. It comes with 5 different sort of foam tips that you can choose from. I found the wearing them at first pretty uncomfortable, and then I think I've just adapted how I put them in or adjusted, but now they're not uncomfortable for an hour or 2 of uses, which is typically what I'll be using them for myself. And then it says about hearing protection. Wearing your AirPods does not provide adequate hearing protection in all circumstances. Well, to be fair, no hearing protection is going to provide adequate hearing protection in all circumstances. So that's just a catch-all. But it's still quite an unusual thing to say if you're certified hearing protection. And it does then say, consult with your employer prior to use in the workplace. And there's some very, very important reasons why that is the case. Simply based on the limitations of what these actually can do when it comes to using them as hearing protection, not just as a media, not just as a media volume limiter, but as actual hearing protection. There's some very serious limitations which we're going to talk about. And the next bit I'm going to talk about what happens when you click on that about hearing protection bit. But headphone safety on the iPhone, it says loud headphone audio can affect your hearing over time. Your iPhone can analyze headphone audio and reduce any sound that is over a set decibel level. And that's again talking about the speaker output. So it's great that they're obviously raising the profile of noise-induced hearing loss and so on, which is a very, very important thing to do. Given that the prevalence of occupational hearing loss and hearing loss in general is absolutely huge. So when we go into about hearing protection, you click on safety information, you get this. Now, this is important information for anyone that's trying to select any hearing protection device, but specifically the AirPods for use as hearing protection. So we've got here 3 different settings that you can have: transparency mode, adaptive mode, and noise cancellation mode. And each one comes with its own total attenuation values, and you've got those ranges there, which is a little bit unusual because why are you getting a range? But you get a range of protection when you're selecting any of these, and you can see that they're massively different. 13 to 18 dB of protection when you're on transparency mode, up to 26 to 32 when you're in noise cancellation mode. So it says each listening mode offers a different amount of protection. Total attenuation and exposure limit may vary with fit and environmental sound level. Values above represent expected protection levels for most users in a sustained 100 dB environment. Now, that's a pretty key detail because, first of all, obviously no environment is of a sustained 100 dB. It's dynamic, it's changing, and absolutely critical to any of this is the frequency content of that environment, which we'll talk about a bit more shortly. But in any case, they've done their testing at that level. So 100 dB environment, and that's the sort of the expected protection you're going to get in those different modes. It says the hearing protection feature, not the hearing protection device. The hearing protection feature is not suitable for protection against extremely loud impulse sounds such as gunfire, fireworks, or pneumatic drills. or against sustained sounds louder than 110 dB. Now that's a massive disclaimer. I mean, they're really saying there, combined with the previous bit, really think about if you're going to be using these as hearing protection in the workplace, right? So it says exposure limits derived from World Health Organization recommendations. So if you're using a pneumatic drill, these are not suitable. Now we sort of know that if they're promoting the media limiter as the only thing that they're really promoting as from a hearing protection perspective, there's a good reason for that. And we'll look at that in a bit more detail as well. Then it talks about the passive attenuation, which is a really important thing to be including. They've got the HML levels. So essentially the passive attenuation values for the device in those different frequency ranges. And as per EN 352 part 2, the passive attenuation values above only apply in off listening mode or when there is no battery charge, which is a key requirement for certified CE marked PPE, hearing protection devices, PPE in the UK. So hearing protection is off in each of these two cases, or when loud sound reduction is off, which obviously is optional for the user, which is transparency or adaptive modes. So you get to choose your different listening modes. So you can have transparency, adaptive, and noise cancellation. You get to choose hearing protection mode on or off. You can have hearing assistance. You could take a hearing test, which I'll touch on in a second, but it's a great little feature that they've got there. The AirPods are really sort of getting people talking about the use of hearing aids as well, the use and acceptance of hearing enhancement devices. And there's a big shift in the US about over-the-counter OTC hearing aids, they call them. So essentially, you don't need to go via your doctor. It's a demedicalized device. So of course, then the price is lower, as is the support, because it's a consumer device, kind of do it yourself. But there's a lot of pros and cons to this. But you do get to take a hearing test, which as a clinical audiologist, I was super intrigued by. And so I did that. And these were my hearing test results, and you can therefore track your hearing profile. Last time I had a hearing test, I think was probably done by myself quite a while ago, because I no longer practice as a clinical audiologist, but certainly done tens of thousands of hearing tests on thousands of people in my time, and I was quite pleasantly surprised to see that according to my AirPods, I've still got normal hearing as a 40-year-old, so I'm quite happy about that. But I did used to have really good hearing, so although I'm still at a normal level, my hearing has decreased. So that's a great feature if you can do a quick hearing test on yourself. And from what I could tell, it was pretty, it was a good process. It was good. It was fairly robust. I think self-service of hearing tests and so on is a really important thing. And even self-service of hearing aids and programming of hearing aids is a good thing as well. I think the clinical nature of hearing in general is it's got pros and cons, but I think more cons, unfortunately, for people that would benefit from hearing enhancement devices. But slightly off topic. When you're using the AirPods, this is sort of one of the screens that you see. You get a volume bar, and you get to select which mode you're in. So when you're on transparency mode, you kind of just click on that. And then for the acoustic seal test, you pop them in, you press the play button, and then it will give you basically a pass fail. You got a good seal or not, which is a good feature, right? If you're trying to use them as either hearing enhancement or just as earphones for music or as hearing protection, this is generally a good thing. Ear defenders, ear plugs with this sort of a feature is a good thing. And of course, we have that in our earmuffs, a built-in seal test and fit assessment and wear rates and all that kind of stuff. But it's good to see this as well. Now, getting into the data of the effectiveness of the AirPods as hearing protection. So we're going to start off with part 2. So this is passive earplug performance. And this is the one that really kind of sets the stage, if you like, for these as being hearing protection or not, or rather, where are they suitable for use as hearing protection? And so I'll assume that people here are not as into hearing protection as I am, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're actually looking at here. So the top table is the data that you need to have, and they have produced as part of the assessment of any hearing protection device as hearing protection by a third party, by a notified body. So they assess at each frequency band, each octave band, the attenuation that is provided. You get 16 people are tested. They wear the hearing protection. They have a hearing test done, and then the attenuation is measured. And then they take the standard deviation off of the mean attenuation each octave band, and then you get your assumed protection value at each octave band. And so this graph is showing in the orange is the mean attenuation minus the standard plus or minus the standard deviation, and then you use the assumed protection value. So the blue line is then what gets built into the single number rating for the earplug. So what's the main thing to take away from this is, and this is very typical of most hearing protection devices, is that in low frequencies, passive attenuation is very ineffective compared to high frequencies. And that's just the nature of sound. High frequencies can kind of get around things, get through things. Low frequencies can get around things, get through things, whereas high frequencies tend to bounce off materials more. So you get higher attenuation at the high frequencies and lower attenuation at the low frequencies. Now those calculations, those test results are then used to make the single number rating, which stands for both, SNR, which stands for single number rating, but to people who understand how this stuff is put together, also as simply not relevant when you're trying to choose a pair of earplugs or ear muffs. But in any case, we'll see why that is. So the single number rating is an estimate of overall passive noise reduction. The high, medium, and low frequency values describe the passive noise reduction in the different frequency ranges. So here you can see that in the high frequency range, the assumed protection value is 23 decibels, in the medium, 15 decibels, and in the low, 11 decibels. And what this really speaks to is it's really important as duty holders or as occupational hygienists to know the frequency content of the noise in your work environment. Because if you don't know that, you're probably not going to choose the right type of hearing protection for your environment, and then you're going to leave people at a risk of overprotection or underprotection, and then obviously the ensuing issues with each of those. So that's the test results from their 352 Part 2 assessment. They get an SNR rating of 18 dB. Now, hearing protection devices, not the protection you expect. So they've got an 18 dB SNR rating. So that is the mean measurement minus one standard deviation. That's how you get the SNR. In other countries, they use the NRR. And the NRR typically uses two standard deviations. That is the noise reduction rating. It's the same concept as an SNR, but they tend to come out as a lower figure because they're using minus two standard deviations. And this study from '96 is one that it's a great reference material for thinking about hearing protection and the selection of hearing protection. Here you've got about a dozen different types of earplugs that were used, and what they did in this study was they took the noise reduction rating from the box. So you can see that it ranges from 15 NRR up to sort of 26, 27 NRR. That's the yellow, and they also then measured the real world protection. So the actual protection that the earplug in these situations was providing. You could see that in the best case scenario, the real world protection provided by an earplug was below half the rating on the box. And some of them it's far, far lower. Now that's for earplugs. For ear muffs, you could see that the box rating NRR varied from less variability, but then they varied from sort of 22 up to 25 NRR. And you could see that typically the measured protection value from those ear muffs was about half of the box rating, a half and above. So less variability simply because they're easier to put on. That generally accounts for most of it. Earplugs tend to wiggle out. They're hard to get in correctly the first time. If they do get them in correctly the first time, they wiggle out over time. People just normally don't put in earplugs properly at all. Lack of training, lack of desire. They want to hear what's going on around them, so they want to not have the hearing protection and so on. So you're going to get generally a much lower real world attenuation of a plug compared to an earmuff. So that's important to consider when we then take into context the rating, the NRR rating of the AirPods. So we saw that they have an SNR rating of 18 decibels, but they have an NRR rating of 12 decibels. So that's just the same data really, but taking 2 standard deviations. And this is, America being obviously a big market for Apple, so they've got their noise reduction rating of 12 dB. So when we line up the AirPods NRR against other earplugs, PPE earplugs, AirPods are not PPE, they're Bluetooth headphones with a hearing protection feature. But when you line up their test results against others, you can see that they've got an NRR of 12 dB, and you can see how that lines up against the others. Now, of course, we don't have data on the real world performance of these as hearing protection. Maybe someone will do a study on that. But if you take, the kind of the rule of thumb of less than half is the real world protection provided, then you quickly see that you're down to very limited protection. And indeed, they say in the little box on the bottom left is from their own documentation. So noise reduction rating 12 decibels when used as directed. They know that people don't use hearing protection as expected and so on. So if you use it with the correct fit, with the right tip and in the right way and so on, have the right settings on, you're going to get 12 dB. The range of noise reduction ratings for existing hearing protectors is approximately 0 to 30. So they know that existing hearing protection can often provide no hearing protection whatsoever. Higher numbers denote greater effectiveness. Indeed, they do. So that gives you a bit of an insight into them as hearing protection, really. That is a pretty clear view of it. But they don't just do part 2. Now we've got part 5. So this is all about their active noise reduction performance. So they've got actually 5 different categories of where you can select their noise reduction functionality. So you've got transparency mode, which gives, they report an SNR of 14 dB. Adaptive audio, right slider position, default slider position and left slider position. So you can kind of have head tracking and non-head tracking and surround sound. They're very cool features when you're listening to music and you're moving around. They've got really interesting things, adaptive audio, and it can have, when people start speaking to you, it goes into transparency mode. When you start speaking, it goes into transparency mode. So those slider positions relate to those things. But as you can see, a very broad range of different SNR ratings depending on the slider position in that adaptive audio setting, and then noise cancellation setting, which is 29 dB SNR. Now that is a high SNR rating. But it's important to understand how that functions, and also what frequencies that is applying to, because SNR is just the mashing together of the HML, the high, medium, and low frequency assessment. And as we already saw, you're always going to get in passive performance much better performance in the high frequencies and the low frequencies. It's the opposite in noise cancellation mode. Noise cancellation is highly effective below about 1,000 hertz, and highly ineffective above that. So that's really important to keep in mind. So here we've got their reported results on a plot. So transparency mode and adaptive right, relatively low overall assumed protection values, and then quite high in the other levels. Now, why is that bit important? The health and safety executive expect people or require people to be able to hear their environments at around the sort of the 70 to 80 dB level with hearing protection. If you have hearing protection that reduces your environment to below 70 decibels, then you are overprotected. And if the environment is coming through at above 80 decibels, then you're underprotected. So the 70 to 80 dB is the sweet spot. That's that relatively narrow green section there. What I've done here is I've plotted their transparency mode, adaptive audio, and active noise cancellation data, attenuation data onto this plot. So you can see when the devices are performing adequately in terms of providing enough and not too much hearing protection across different environmental noise levels. So on the x-axis, you've got environmental noise levels ranging from 90 dB up to 110 dB. And then on the y-axis, you've got the at-ear noise level. So the at-ear noise level really does need to be between 70 and 80 at all times, right? That's pretty fundamental, because if it's not, then you're either going to be underprotected and getting exposure and therefore hearing loss and tinnitus, or overprotected and you're missing out on potentially safety critical audio and environmental things, which, you know, a forklift reversing is going to kill you, and noise getting to your ear is going to make you go deaf. So neither ideal. So where are we getting into the green zone? So with transparency mode, if you're in an environment from 90 to 110 dB, you're always going to be underprotected. So okay, that's one thing. So don't be on transparency mode if you're going to be using these as hearing protection. In adaptive audio mode, there is a middle range from sort of 95 up to 105, where if you're on that setting, you're going to be in that green zone. But at 90, you're going to be overprotected, and at 110, you're going to be underprotected. And very similar for the active noise cancellation. You're going to be massively overprotected in lower noise environments, 90 and 95 dB environments, and somewhat underprotected in 110. So that is pretty important to understand. It's worth mentioning that level-dependent hearing protection, both earplugs and earmuffs, are designed to keep you in that green zone. Level-dependent electronic hearing protection, and that is something that, of course, passive hearing protection can't do. They're just going to attempt to give you a sort of a fixed. They have to give you a fixed level of protection in different zones, but the actual protection you get is going to vary massively based on the frequency content of the environment, and also the way that you're wearing the hearing protection and certain personal factors around how you've got it in, desire to use them, how well they're fit, and so on. Fit testing. How fit testing has been performed and so on. So this is a really important factor when selecting hearing protection, and this is where the AirPods fall in that. Not fail in that, but just how they fall in that graph. So the next one we're looking at here is the level dependent feature of the earplugs. Now this is actually a standard for earmuffs, but they've used it for earplugs. So part 7. So I've plotted their data showing the maximum external noise level at which the device can still keep the sound at the ear below 85 dB. 85 dB, I'm sure you will all be aware, is the threshold at which, if you're above that, it's mandatory, it's a legal requirement to wear hearing protection. Between 80 and 85, it's recommended. Below 80, it's not a legal requirement. So this is sort of you're kind of reporting on this threshold at part 7, because that's about hearing protection. So here we've got the high, medium, and low. Sorry, if you have got unmute, do please mute yourself. Thank you. Don't want to hear your private phone call. So high, medium, and low. So transparency mode, you're getting a max environmental noise before 85 dB at the ear, 106, 102, and 107. And then it is lower on the adaptive audio right slider. So those are the ones that they've reported data on. So that is important when you're considering the selection of level dependent modes. It essentially gives you the max level from a noise environment perspective that you can use these in, with the caveats that we've already covered. Part 9, this is now for calls and safety related audio. This is really important in selecting these for use in the workplace. Simply, they say with their AirPods that the audio output can exceed 100 dBA during calls if you have the volume high. So there is no limit on the speaker output when you're using these for making a phone call. This is a fail as a hearing protection device. So, and of course, if you were able to set the volume low, okay, but an employer can't control the volume on an AirPod, and so therefore you can't guarantee 82 dBA limited output for safe comms audio, which is, as I say, a requirement for EN 352. So this is important for duty holders and employers because you are responsible for noise levels coming out of a headphone or an earphone. So call centers and radio headsets and all that sort of stuff, you're responsible for the level of sound coming out of those and then the impact on the wearer. So if they are being exposed to above 85 for continuous periods over a phone of any sort during work hours, whether it's music or whatever, phone calls, you're responsible for it, especially if it then results in hearing loss or tinnitus, which we know is very, very common. So this is a really critical one. And then last but not least, because this is the one that they actually promote, because it's the one that they have comfort and confidence in as a big brand that they're actually doing something here. Part 10, music and media playback. So this is where the AirPods limit playback to 82 dB as a max when EN352 protection is active, which is only in music mode only, and it's an option that you have to obviously switch on. So this doesn't apply to the phone calls, as we've just said, or when you're in adaptive or transparency mode. So in those situations, the volume may well exceed safe limits. So the question is, are AirPods legally usable as workplace PPE? And if yes, where? So this is from their declaration of conformity. So you can see there at the top, Apple Inc., 1 Apple Park Way. And importantly, I want to point out that if you go down a few lines, you can see the product type. It says Bluetooth headphones. And we're going to see why that's really, really important. So key considerations when you're making, you're the duty holder for your workplace, or you're educating your duty holders in your workplace. These are the kind of key considerations that you need to be aware of when making any decisions. AirPods Pro 3 do comply with parts of EN352, but Apple markets them as Bluetooth headphones, not as PPE. Now, under the EU, UK PPE regulations, a product must be placed on the market as PPE if it is to be used as such. Now, it's pretty black and white. So that's kind of that. Now, of course, it's all about risk appetite and doing a risk assessment and all those sort of things. So there's still decisions to be made, but that is pretty clear that they've put the product on the market as Bluetooth headphones, not as PPE. But they have tested it against PPE standards, and we saw the results of that. Now, products sold as PPE must include PPE-specific labeling, instructions, maintenance guidance, lifespan, user limitations, employer duties, all sorts of things. As someone who has brought to market certified PPE, smart PPE, electronic PPE, gone through all of those different things multiple times, there's a lot involved in placing on the market a piece of certified PPE. We work closely with the British Safety Industry Federation, who are sort of our trade body, great advisory group, and I'm on various working groups for these sort of topics. But once you are a piece of PPE, there are certain requirements that come with that, which of course you don't have if you are a consumer Bluetooth headphone with a hearing protection feature. Apple includes many disclaimers throughout their documentation, including this one. Hearing protection is not suitable for use in all workplaces. This is not the sort of wording that you would really find on a more standard hearing protection device piece of PPE, because they are specifically for use in workplace environments where there is noise. But of course, you still have to understand the selection criteria for hearing protection in the workplace, which was EN458, which I would encourage you to read. But EN458 will tell you how to select the right type of hearing protection. It doesn't necessarily account for new technologies, which is why these sort of updates require a bit of thinking, and it also leaves gray areas. I'm not saying that this is a straightforward answer. I know what I would do as a duty holder. I would not be letting people working in noisy environments use AirPods, but it's for a whole variety of reasons, not just simply the test results. Coming up with a risk assessment for these sort of things and a plan of action is obviously a multifaceted thing. So on their declaration of conformity, Apple states, Apple hereby declares that the hearing protection feature on AirPods Pro 3 is compliant with regulation 2016-425 and standards EN352 part 2, 5, 7, 9, and 10, which is pretty interesting because actually what they're saying here is the hearing protection feature. Yes, they've tested the device against all those relevant standards, but the only one that we're actually talking about is part 10. That's the only one that they're promoting. That's the only one that is actually a big green tick because they conform to EN352 part 10. Everything else is heavily caveated because it's not they're not all pass fail, but certainly the ones that are a test result, they're not necessarily good as hearing protection in any workplace environment, which is a pretty important factor. Not to say that there aren't some that would be suitable. And also it's a company decision, of course, how you approach these things. So therefore, although AirPods contain a hearing protection feature, it is unclear whether the AirPods themselves can legally substitute certified PPE in regulated noise environments. So some additional practical considerations. When the battery drains, protection can reduce down to 0. They require a paired iPhone or an iPad to function, full stop. So you need to have a phone with you. They're not ruggedized, they don't fit and aren't comfortable for many people's ears. I went on quite a number of sort of online forums talking about the AirPods and their use and so on. Most people return them because they're not comfortable, or if they return them, it's typically for that reason. But them not being ruggedized, you know, I've almost lost these many times. I'm actually amazed that I still have them after 2 months, that I haven't lost them, because they are small when they're when they're just in your pocket or on the desk or something. Very easy to lose, and they can get knocked out quite easily as well if you're putting on some other head-worn device and so on. They cost £215 or $249, so really not cheap at all. Actually very expensive for both what they are and as a hearing protection device with this sort of level of functionality. Very expensive. Of course, a big part of that is paying for the brand, but they do have a bunch of other features, right? So like the hearing testing, the hearing enhancement thing, the noise cancellation when you're listening to music is very good, but those are obviously separate to AirPods as hearing protection. They give you only 6 to 8 hours of battery when you've got the noise cancellation on. So if you want that higher level of protection, which again is only going to be really functioning in the low frequencies, they're only going to be lasting 6 to 8 hours. The hearing test functionality, the seal check, hearing aid function, when it's activated, are all potentially beneficial features. And people may have them anyway, which is obviously an interesting consideration when deciding if this should be used as hearing protection in your workplace. Now, they do also introduce a number of challenges for workplace management. Many of you will be familiar with the Health and Safety Executives CUF acronym, CUFF, which is part of their workplace noise intervention campaign. It's been running for now 2 years. It's got another few years to go, where they're going out and looking specifically in the early stages around the management of hearing protection, not the provision, not just the provision, but how it's actually being managed. And this covers, is the hearing protection being provided and being used in good condition? Is it being used? Is it fitting well to the ear? And is it fit for purpose? And as we've seen on the previous slides, these are not trivial answers if you're not very involved, or if you don't have smart hearing protection that does it all for you, or at least gives you the information you need for that. So what should you do? First of all, you should do a shout test if you're wondering about if you've got a noise problem. So if you need to raise your voice to communicate in your workplace, you have a noise problem and you need to provide hearing protection. That's really step one. You know, don't go away and then come back with more detailed measurement equipment. No, if you need to shout to communicate and people aren't wearing hearing protection, get hearing protection on them immediately. Then identify opportunities to eliminate noise at source, because you've sort of put a plaster over the problem, which is your hearing protection. So not the most effective way of reducing risk, but it certainly is a stopgap while you buy yourself more time to find more effective ways of controlling the noise, and ideally opportunities to eliminate the noise at source. Then you need to know the frequency content of the noise in your work environment so that you can actually make sure you've got the right hearing protection on, and that you're providing the right hearing protection, and then to know sources of that noise and then how you can reduce it and so on. So knowing the frequency content is really important. Absolutely critical. Produce an action plan for reducing the risk of exposure over time. So it's not a one and done. You don't provide hearing protection and walk away. You don't identify opportunities to eliminate the noise at source and then assume that you're done. No, you actually have to have an action plan over time. How are you going to continuously improve the workplace environment? And this is all linked to expectations from the health and safety executive. Implement health surveillance. If you've got a noise problem, if people are wearing hearing protection, you're going to need health surveillance, which simply means do hearing tests. You should be doing a baseline assessment, and then personally, I would be doing it every year, a new hearing test. But this is only going to be showing you if your hearing protection, your noise control measures are working or not. They're not going to help you. It isn't a control in itself, and it's really more of, from my perspective, a regulatory and liability thing. Because if you actually show on a health surveillance test, a hearing test, that someone's lost their hearing, well, it's too late. You know, there's no cure. You've failed. So this is not going to help you. And even if it shows no reduction in hearing loss, it doesn't mean that people aren't being exposed, because it takes many years of exposure for that hearing loss to actually show up. So regardless of all of that, though, still a legal requirement to do health surveillance if you've got a noise problem. So do it, and it is a very, very important thing to do, but it's a whole topic in itself. Where noise exposure risk remains, follow CUF. So make sure that is top of mind if you are providing hearing protection. If you've not been able to eliminate the noise at source and control it in more effective ways, and it's still at over 85 dB, or you've still got to raise your voice, you need to provide hearing protection. But you can't just provide hearing protection. You also need to know, is it in good condition? Is it being used? Is it fit for purpose? And is it fitting the ear correctly? Then I'd recommend you join the Hearing Conservation WhatsApp group. So you can get in contact with me to join that. It's about 100 people, maybe 120 more people working in noisy environments or supporting people in noisy environments. Share it. It's kind of a peer support group. I've got this type of noise, this type of problem, and we share lots of different resources there. Free to join, free to contribute. It's peer led. So I'd recommend you join that. I'd recommend you also read the UKHCA guidance on fit testing of hearing protection devices. Quick disclaimer, I am one of the co-authors of that, but it is a good document on really, and it's an introduction to fit testing of hearing protection devices. So to know your real world performance of the hearing protection is what you've provided actually effective. And the last thing I think you should do is connect with me. So I'm very happy to help anyone here with anything related to hazards in the workplace, noise, dust, vibration. At Eve, we do it all. My background is as a specialist in noise and hearing, but you're very welcome to connect with me, and you could do that via this QR code. So this is to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you would also like to find out how we solve a lot of these problems with our technology at Eve, you can have a look at our website at eve.io, and you could, of course, also email me at david@eve.io. So thank you so much for your attention, and very happy to go to questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. That was an excellent presentation, and we have got a couple of questions. The first one comes from Mike Robertson. He says, great presentation. Have you done a similar exercise in comparison for the US? And I guess that means US standards. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have done I've looked at the data. It's mostly related to the NRR stuff. I've not done it as in depth for this because I'm only really an expert, I'd say, in the standards related to Europe. But there are a lot of similarities. So I've not done it in depth. Happy, if you have specific questions, happy to get into it with you. Because now I know, for good or bad, I know the AirPods Pro 3s, just that model, inside and out. So happy to talk about it more. Excellent.
And a question from Richard Brown. What is your view on the use of otoacoustic emissions for hearing tests in traditional audiometry?
Much more effective as an early indicator of noise exposure. So it will capture temporary threshold shifts much better. It will capture hearing hair cell damage before it's become permanent. It will capture much more sensitive changes to hearing that won't show up on an audiogram. So an audiogram is typically seen as the gold standard, but it's mostly because it's been around the longest. It's relatively simple to do. And so it's widely accessible. Otoacoustic emission is also been around. OAE testing has been around for 40 or 50 years in itself. In the UK, it's been widely used as part of the newborn hearing screening program for must be 20 years now. So every child born in the UK by the age of, I think it's 8 days, has an OAE test. Takes a matter of seconds, and you get a very quick hearing profile. And for me, that is the right test for health surveillance, right? It's a screening test. It's very quick, doesn't require any feedback. Audiograms require input. It's not automated. It's, there's all sorts of issues with audiometry. The biggest one for me, though, is that you can show as normal with a hearing loss, right? That's the biggest issue. And so you're not capturing, the progression into a more serious hearing loss at the right stage, which an OAE test can do. So it's a topic I'm very familiar with. Very happy to talk about it more. So by all means, follow up. But I'm pro OAE, but I'm not anti audiogram because it has got other things. If you can do both, do both. But if you could only do one, I would say probably do the OAE. But that's just me.
Thanks, David. Adam Roberts has put in a question: limitations granted regards to the frequency effectiveness. Is ANC a viable form of PPE?
It's a yes and no, and it depends. So it's if your situation is I've got this frequency content of noise in my environment, and then you take that and you match it to the passive attenuation profile of the hearing protection, and it's enough protection on the passive function, great. Now, if there are certain scenarios where it then goes, the noise in the environment goes higher in a certain frequency band, and that's when your ANC kicks in, or your ANC kicks in is specialized for that issue, then yeah, that's appropriate, right? If you need more protection there. But as I say, ANC is only really effective, or at all, up until I think it's about 1200 hertz. So if you've got really loud sounds in the high frequencies, it's not going to do anything anyway. So you really need to understand what we're talking about, and also keep in mind that from a certification perspective, this stuff has to work with power off. So ANC needs power. It's an active process. But that's more of a regulatory standards thing. In the practical sense, so sort of saying, well, do I want to use this PPE in this situation? You need to know the frequency content. Is it a viable form of PPE? I would say broadly yes, but that's different to the testing standards, because it will not be part of EN 352 part 2 for plugs or part 1 for muffs. With the ANC, it won't be counted. But in very, very high noise industries, military, for example, in tanks and so on, where it's just you're in a metal box with incredibly loud sounds, they typically all have ANC active, because there's no way, if you've got 130 dB environment, there's no way that you can passively reduce that level of noise down to below 85. So you have to have the phase cancellation thing, but it is not as simple as that, as what I've just said. But that's the basic principle. That's why it depends, and it's a yes and a no, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks for that. And Adam's come back and saying thank you for the presentation and the answer. It's very good. Andy Fisher is asking, it's becoming increasingly difficult to track down octave band data from manufacturers. Have you any thoughts on that?
It shouldn't be, because it's a requirement. You have to put that information out there. Not sure why they wouldn't be showing it unless they, well, pulling the wool over the eyes. I don't know. You should ask for it, and if you can't get it, I would be very wary of its performance at certain bands, right? So that it shouldn't be difficult. HML is sort of the next stage, because the octave band stuff is what makes up the HML stuff, and the HML stuff makes up the SNR stuff, which is why it's this transformation function from good data to huge assumptions in what the thing's doing. And when people then use just the number that pops out at the end, either the SNR or the NR, that's why I think of it as simply not relevant, because it doesn't mean anything for when you're actually trying to match a hearing protection requirement to a hearing protection device. So yeah, it shouldn't be difficult to track it down. I don't know why it would be. Go to the, I'm happy to help you with that if you're wondering, or maybe it's just in a little zone on their website. I'm pretty sure it has to be made available.
Yeah, I mean, Andy does say I usually take a look on the ARCO website where they sell the hearing protection, and octave is usually in the specs tab. So
yeah, maybe go to the manufacturer's website. If you're buying it from a third party, maybe they're just not familiar with what their requirements are from a marketing and standards agency perspective. But if you go to the manufacturer, it should be in the manufacturer's data.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there was a question here from Claire Jameson. Is the hearing protection mode working if listening to music whilst wearing AirPods as hearing protection?
I thought I was following it until that last bit. So say it once. Sorry, once.
Well, that's the way it's written. If you want to look in the chat and read it.
Is the hearing protection mode working if listening to music whilst wearing AirPods as hearing protection? Yes. So the hearing protection mode is that. So the hearing protection mode is limiting the output from the speaker when listening to music. That's all it is. That's the only thing that they promote as the hearing protection feature of the AirPods Pro 3 is that. But that's all it does. It is they're not promoting the environmental reduction when they talk about hearing protection. They've tested against the appropriate standards for attenuation performance, but they then discounted all of that when they actually talk about what it does. And I believe that's because it's pretty limited in what it can do, and there's huge caveats if you're ever going to use these as PPE. Huge caveats, and as I say, I personally wouldn't, just from a liability perspective, and like I just don't think they're going to be suitable in 95% of scenarios. But for what you to answer your question, yes, the hearing protection mode is working if listening to music. That is just all it is.
Yeah, we've just hit the hour mark now, so I guess I know there's a few more coming through that you might like to have a look at and catch up with those people later with, David. But thank you very much for this most insightful presentation.
You're very welcome.
And just coming up, I'll just make a call out for our January webinar. We're going to have another noise talk in the last week of January with the views of Chris Steele and from Health and Safety Executive. So we'll give you the date and time in the near future. So thank you everybody for attending, and have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks everyone. All the best. Bye.
Thank you, David. Yeah.
Thank you.